And here's what we're talking about today. In a moment, we're asking, should women born in the 1950s be given £10,000 as compensation for the government increasing their pension age? Campaigners claim women have been treated unfairly by rapid changes and a lack of communication. But is it just too much money for the government to pay out at this time? Then is Sheffield City Council right to ban junk food adverts on council-owned buildings? Or should they be happy to receive money from advertisers? Bit of a tight time, isn't it, for them? New rules on new rules banning adverts for junk food, gambling and even airlines. But is this a good move for the council? After that, does the UK need to introduce free childcare to help boost those birth rates? Research suggests the country will become reliant on immigration by the end of the century, unless more babies are born in Britain. But with childcare costs so high, people are being put off starting families. So should the government cover the cost to help out? And later, are you annoyed by the New England kit? Manufacturers Nike have altered the England flag on the back of the collar to include different colours. And it's ruffled more than a few feathers, with even the Culture Secretary sharing her upset. But are you annoyed by it? Or was it a bit too much fuss over nothing? Call us on 0207 862 2222. That's 0207 862 2222. Calls from landlines may cost up to 16p per minute, plus any call setup fees, and calls from mobiles may cost considerably more. Send us a message, really simple, Facebook or Twitter, and search for Jeremy Vine on 5. And of course, you can use the hashtag Storm Huntley. Now, let's get into our first topic. I'm glad I've got two men talking about this one with me. Should women born in the 1950s be given £10,000? Get your calls coming in now. It's on the front of every single newspaper, or at least inside them. The so-called Waspi generation, Women Against State Pension Increases, have long been campaigning for compensation over the government's handling of a rise to the state pension aid. A new report has suggested that each woman affected by the changes should be given between £1,000 and £3,000. But campaigners say that's not enough, calling for £10,000 each, with some women losing out almost £50,000. The campaigners say, the coalition government of 2010 sped up the decision to increase their retirement age without correctly informing everyone who will be affected by it. But now, I'm going to ask men about this one, obviously, because why wouldn't I be? Matt, I mean, you're obviously a lot younger than me. I'm nearly in this category, by the way, very nearly. Matt, do you think these campaigners have a point? It does, to me, seem ridiculously unfair how these women have been treated.
I have huge sympathy for these women. I mean, listening to a campaigner talking about this on the radio this morning, coming in, some of those affected are using food banks as a consequence, it seems. And it is obviously quite clear that £1,000, £2,000, £3,000 is going to only scratch the surface of some of the damage that has been done to these women's retirement. The issue, I guess, is, so I would back at least those who've been most negatively affected and impacted being given more than what the Ombudsman has recommended. I guess the problem is that this was a mistake by the government. And if what I'm calling for materialises, in other words, if more money than is being suggested is stumped up, and there's no guarantee, by the way, I don't think, that what the Ombudsman has recommended will actually be implemented.
That's just guidance. I mean, number 10 don't have to take any notice.
No, indeed, and we watch this space. But the problem is that the rest of us will pay for it. So we, the taxpayer, are going to be paying, ultimately, if we do pay, if the government does cough up, for mistakes by the government.
Now, this is it's a parliamentary health and service ombudsman, as you said, and recommended this after a 5-year report, Albie. We've already spent 5 years, that wouldn't have been cheap either, looking into this. But it doesn't actually mean there's any definitive action to be taken, and Labour have already said they need time to reflect on the report as well. So it's on the surface, it's a victory for the Waspi women. Many have faced severe financial hardships, and many have severe illness, mental illness by this as well, mental health aspects. But can we afford it at the moment? I mean, maybe it makes more sense to concentrate on the younger generation, giving them more help.
Well, I think we've seen the British state consistently over time benefit older voters as opposed to younger voters. I think on the issue of the Waspi women, there was an administrative error that the government made. I don't think many people disagree with the principle that equalising the pension age for both women and men to 65 was the right thing to do, or that with the principle that as the population ages and we're all living for longer, that the pension age should rise as the life expectancy rises. Those all seem like pretty reasonable things to me. But the issue was, in this case, I think, was that it wasn't communicated properly to these women that these changes were going to be happening. Now, some of the rebuttals that I've been seeing from young people were these people not watching the news at the time that this announcement was made. But the point is, the government should have let these women know. But the sums of money are just so big, and at a time where the nation is having to tighten its belts, I think it's right that some thought is given into whether these very large sums of money are being paid out to pensioners who are, as a proportion of the population, the wealthiest cohort of the population. That's not all pensioners, but as a cohort of the population, it is a fact to say pensioners are the wealthiest cohort of the population.
But the problem is that, as Albie says, these are very large sums of money, but they're very large sums of money in aggregate. Actually giving someone, say, £5,000, maybe even £10,000, who's been so negatively impacted by the administrative errors that I think we can all agree on, that in itself is not a huge amount. It's when you lump everyone together, and that's why it is a challenging decision. I have to say, I was not massively impressed. I was listening to Emily Thornberry talking about this, the Shadow Attorney General, Labour Shadow Attorney General, and she was saying, basically, let the government decide. We're not going to get in the government's way. And that shows that Labour hasn't, I don't think, done enough thinking about this, and also that they're very, very worried about the tightness of public finances when they're on the doorstep of government themselves.
They have fudged it. I mean, 3.8 million women should have received letters back in the day when this was first announced. In 1995 it was first announced. 3.8 million women should have received letters notifying them of the changes. Now, bearing in mind, these women were probably in their 30s and 40s then. You're busy, you're working mums. You're not thinking about your pension. Not many people in their 30s and 40s think about their pensions when they're that age, do they?
And they should, and we should. I mean,
we all should. Of course we all should, but a lot of us don't. If we're honest here, we are human. I don't. I'm getting close to that age group, but I don't, because it's a bit scary, it's a bit confusing, so I don't think about it. So I understand. And these women weren't sent letters.
If you don't think about your pension in your 30s and 40s, is it therefore the government's problem and the government's fault if you're disadvantaged later on in life?
But the government didn't notify them. That's the issue with this. And by the way, the compensation isn't for the money they missed out on by equalising the pension, the retirement age with men and women. It's not that 6 years that many women miss out on. It's just the compensation for the fact they weren't notified.
May I just make a wider point as well? Because although we disagree on this, Albie, I think Albie makes a very important point, that the baby boomers have enjoyed comparatively not great largesse, but much greater benefits from society than younger generations. And if you look at Jeremy Hunt's most recent budget, how much of that budget was dedicated to younger people? So that is a political problem with addressing what is undoubtedly an injustice.
OK, let's go to some of the callers. Hey, it's a woman. Hello. Patricia in North Yorkshire. Patricia, good afternoon. Thank you for calling. What would you like to say?
I didn't have any notification. I had no letter. I had no warning that I wasn't going to be able to claim my pension at 60. And I couldn't claim it till I was nearly 65. So I've lost over 4 years' pension. And it's not, I want compensation. I want that money that they should have paid us.
Right, OK.
We paid it in, they need to pay it out.
Well, Patricia, can you just give us a brief outline of how it affected your life at the time and when you discovered that you weren't going to get your pension as you expected at 60?
Well, I think I discovered probably when I was about 59, when I was starting to see when my pension would be due. And unfortunately, when I was 60, when I should have got my pension, my husband was terminally ill. And so I had to carry on working instead of being at home and being able to look after him. So, it causes it's such, we need the money, they need to give us the money we paid in, and they need to pay it out.
And Patricia, how do you feel about the announcement today that, the government were in the wrong, you should have been notified and you are owed compensation, but that compensation could be £1,000?
Well, the compensation's fine, but it's not the same as giving us hours, is it?
No, it's not.
It's
Patricia.
our money, we paid it in.
Yeah, and you contributed all your working life. Patricia, thank you so much for the call. I think that illustrates exactly the problem here and how many women's lives have been affected. Let's go to Valerie now, also in North Yorkshire. Valerie, hello, what would you like to say?
First of all, hello, and thank you for having me on the panel. Just to say, I did work the full 6 years extra. I was 60 and couldn't retire when I was 66. So when the gentleman on the panel said, well, someone's got to pay for it, well, I think if he does his sums, he'll know who's paid for it, because we did 6 years without our pension. We did 6 years without our pension, and we also paid 6 years extra national insurance, which if I'd retired at 60, I wouldn't have been paying any national insurance, and nobody's made any mention to this. So for 6 extra years, I paid national insurance, whereas if you had retired at 60 and has continued to work, I would not have paid national insurance. And all the things that other people have said about I had a poorly husband because I was trying to work while he had cancer. The things that if I had been retired, I would have been able to be at home to look after him full time, which I wasn't. I was trying to work and look after him as well.
And Valerie, I think your story, Valerie, is echoing so many of the case histories that I've read this morning as well, and it's sort of like it's falling on women of that age group who are caring for terminally ill partners or maybe aging parents, suddenly being in a financial trap of, well, I've got to carry on working,
Absolutely.
but I feel like I should be caring for my husband or my aging parents or something or other. But, Albie, I'm coming back to you on this one. This is not a freebie. This is not a benefit. As Valerie's pointed out, this is something she paid him for her entire life. Why should she be made to suffer like this?
Well, first of all, the state pension is a benefit. I know people don't like to think of it as a benefit, but it comes from the Department of Work and Pensions, and it's paid for the same way that other benefits are paid for by taxpayers. So that'll be the first point.
Yeah, the taxpayers already paid into it.
And I understand entirely the injustice that has happened, and I do think compensation should be paid. I think that is important. Clearly, the government should have notified these women. But I don't disagree with the principle that the pension age should be 65. And I mean, no one's talking about the compensation maybe for the men who had to work for the extra 6 years the whole time the state pension has been in place. That's not a conversation that we're having. And maybe that's an important conversation to have. The state pension, in my opinion, should always have been coming at 65. I don't know why there was a difference between 60 and 65. Obviously, we all agree that it should be 65 now, and I think the compensation should be paid. Do I think the full state pension that was missing between that time period should be paid to these women? No, because it's unaffordable.
Valerie, are you still with us, Valerie? I think you are.
I am, and I don't disagree with the fact that I'm not expecting to have 6 years of pension back. But as I clearly said, when they're saying they can't afford it, well, if I hadn't if I had retired at 60, you wouldn't have had 6 years of my pension, and you wouldn't have had 6 years of extra national insurance, and then the amount that we've all paid is in that pot that we have all paid. So therefore, what we're asking for, as you said, I wouldn't even call it compensation, but the fact is that when someone mentioned 1,000 to 3,000, well, if they offered me that, I'd say, keep it, give it to some charity. But really, I would like something back to recognise that we have had to suffer, whether people think that or not. And I've fought this for 6 years with people, and I've had discussions with them and said, no, I'm sorry. I was hoping when I was 60, I would retire. I was a nurse. I was hoping to retire and do 2 or 3 days a week and continue so that my pot would be better than it was, when I retired. And obviously that didn't happen, and it didn't happen for another reason, because of my husband's health and my health to the very end of that 66.
Valerie, just a quick question. Mm-hmm. Did you think when the state pension age was different between men and women, it was 60 for women and for men it was 65, did you think at the time that was unfair?
It probably is now. It probably wasn't when the pension first came out, as I said to you. Obviously now, I think when we are talking about equality, I would agree. But we're not talking about when you're talking about that, when it originally was, that women were 60, That was years. That's historically, isn't it? Now, yes, I understand that, and I do agree that it should be equal. But to have it put on top of you suddenly, you know, that you're working 6 extra years, and I really struggled in the last 2 years to work, even though I love my job. I absolutely love my job, and I gave 100% to my job, and I gave 100% of anything I did. So when I did actually retire, I didn't officially retire, I was 66, but about 12 months before, I had to give up. I couldn't work any longer. And it's not because I wanted to give up, it's because I wasn't able to. And I wonder how many ladies are in that same position themselves, let alone the partners not being, you know, of good health, themselves not being in good health as well. You know, so, yeah, I think it needs to be looked at again. I agree, I think it should be equal, but we're not talking about we're talking about historically, isn't it, when it was set at 60 and 65.
Yes,
so,
Valerie, thank you so much. We've got so many other women getting in touch now. Thank you so much for your call. Brilliant call.
Can I
Good
just
luck,
jump in very briefly and just say, there seems to me that there are 2 categories of women. One category, like Valerie, who did keep on working when she hadn't been intending to keep on working, with all the sacrifices at that age that could bring, and a frustration of expectation. Then there were the women who hadn't planned to be able to continue working, couldn't continue working for whatever reason, weren't able to get the job or extend their job, and those people are massively, massively shortchanged then in their old age. And as I've said at the beginning, I think we need to come back to this point, some of them have literally been using food banks as a consequence.
And sold their homes and everything.
And sold their homes.
It's not one size fits all with this compensation issue, is it? Right, let's go to Susan in Angus now. Susan, hello, what would you like to say?
Hi there. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure.
Now, I'm 66 in September, and I finally get my state pension. Now, I worked for many years in Michelin Tire Company in Dundee, and I'd heard about this increase in pension age for us. I never was informed officially. However, every year we got a pension statement from Michelin, which gave us our pension forecast, because it was a final salary pension, and also they would say about the state pension. One year, after many years, my state retirement age was 2018, when I would have been 60. One year, it jumped up to 2023. And at the time, I was like to my now late husband, by the way, he was 61, he didn't live to see pension age.
Bless him.
And I says, my goodness, he was 6.5 years older than me, and, you know, we planned to retire about, you know, when young enough. But this changed. Many years down the line, my best friend got a letter saying this had gone up to 66. And I went, well, wait a minute, you're 18 months older than me, so that means I'm going to get a letter. And I did. For 66. So now my pension age, the retirement age, well, the year would be 2024, which is in September now. So this £10,000 that they bandied about, I never believed it anyway, to be honest with you. I never thought we'd get anything like that. And even 10,000 is paltry. And for them now to come out with saying, what is it, £2,900?
Yeah.
It's a damned
Maximum.
insult. A damned insult.
What would make up for what you've been through, Susan? What amount of money?
Well, I couldn't put a price on it. I mean, it's 6 years now. OK, I know about the 6th year. Oh, and I might add, do you know who started this? A woman. Many, many, many years ago, this woman, wherever she was working, they used to make them retire at 60. This particular woman wanted to stay on in her job until she was 65, like a man. It went to court, or whatever they did in them days. The government, what I recall, considered bringing the men's age down to 63, but that would be too much money. So no. The women then got put to 65.
I think
that's all I remember.
Susan, let's Matt.
I just want to ask Susan a very quick question. Will what the government decides to do, how they decide to respond to the Ombudsman, we might find this out next week, will that impact on how you vote in the general election? Will what Labour says in its turn impact? Because older voters are more likely to vote, and there are a lot of women in your position.
Don't get me started on them. The Tories and Labour are as bad as each other. I won't vote for any of them.
Hallelujah to that one, Susan. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people nodding in agreement with you watching on that one. Susan, thank you so much for your call. Really appreciate it, and good luck, my lovely. Thank you for all your calls on this. So many you wanted to get in touch. Very important topic. But we have to move on. After the break, is Sheffield City Council right to ban junk food adverts?